All right, this episode of the Land Podcast is with Steve Hansen. Steve has been on Whitetail Cribs. We've done some previous episodes with him for the Land Podcast and the Exodus Podcast. He has an extensive background in the world of real estate and whitetails, and we're talking about CRP, what you should know, and he recently acquired a new farm in Iowa, and we break that down and how he goes through his mental checklist before helping a client buy a farm or if he's going to buy a farm. These are the things that he really looks at. So hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Here we go. Steve, what's going on?
Oh, not much. Just hanging out here, enjoying the cool air.
Yeah, it's been a fun weekend. Thanks for having us out here again.
No problem. It's been quick.
It always does, and I mentally always have so many plans to get done, and then I don't really realize how long some stuff.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So the driving distance out here gets everybody.
Yeah, but no, it's fun. We this weekend we hung cameras on a new parcel of yours. I'll definitely want to dive into that, but. Hung some cameras, did a little bit of fishing, and now we're recording some podcasts. But before we get into all that, you've been on Whitetail Cribs here. You've recorded some other podcasts with us, which are always appreciative of that. But go ahead and introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are.
My name's Steve Hansen. Live down here in southern Iowa. Kind of involved in all things deer and land, and work for United Country Real Estate out of Albia.
So. Yeah, and this part of the country is pretty unique. We went by one bank, and that's where Jesse James
right.
had his last stick up there.
Yep, his last robbery in Corydon, Iowa there.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of cool random history down here. And also, I would call current whitetail history as well.
Yes.
For the whitetail culture. But so as you mentioned, you're an agent for United Country. You've been a broker here for...
About 15 years.
15 years. And so every time we're together, I always like to get your opinion on the market, because I know the markets are so different across even the state of Iowa.
Right, big time.
But it's always interesting to get your perspective on what you're seeing. So year to date, what have you seen? Actually, I should say last time we were out here, I think it was March maybe or February.
Yep.
What have you seen from March to now that maybe is the same or a little bit different with the market that you've been seeing?
I definitely think that the market's slowed a little bit. The top, like as far as hunting farms, the true top end, top quality, best neighborhoods, those prices haven't changed a lot. That demand exists, and that one hasn't changed. The ones that are kind of like, don't have an immediate neighbor that's going to possibly be a buyer, and you're truly having to search out the market to find a buyer, those have slowed a little bit as well. And that's probably just a function of the interest rates and the cost of money finally catching up with things. It hasn't been a big change, but it's definitely noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it is. I talk about it on here all the time, but just how much difference the money is, like borrowing money versus a year ago to today, from a monthly, mortgage payment, which most people, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people are utilizing.
Yeah. A good example of that, I was working with a young couple, and they had going to buy an 80. It was 80 acres priced around $5,000 an acre. They were borrowing money at 7.5%. So the cost of the land was about $400,000. It was a fixed rate for 20 years. If they didn't refinance or didn't change anything, by the time they paid it off, they would have spent over $1 million.
Wow.
And that just shows the gravity of what interest rates can do to the land and to land purchases.
Yeah, so. The long term, that compounds. So everyone talks about investing, and if you get 7 or 8 or 9% return on the markets, then your money doubles in 11 years. And unfortunately, the inverse of that when you're borrowing at 7%.
When you're borrowing, it works against you.
Yeah, it makes it really challenging. So overall, you think things are stable and just maybe not as large as a buyer's pool, maybe.
Yeah, yep. I think it's very stable, and there still is strong demand. Mm-hmm. People are being a little bit more careful about what they spend, a little bit more careful about what they buy, and things are sitting on the market a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, as we're recording this the following week, they are supposed to raise the Fed by 0.25%? Do you think that accelerates that, or do you think that's not enough? That's really much of a difference than what it is today.
I think it's definitely going to accelerate the slowdown, or at least keep it in everyone's mind, because a lot of what happens is perception. People just think, oh, the market's slowing now, and that then perpetuates itself. But I don't, like, the people that are shopping are still shopping. Maybe they're buying a little bit less, or not making as offers as quickly. But it's surprising that it hasn't the higher interest rates haven't slowed things more. I mean, we're talking interest rates have over doubled in 2 years.
Yeah.
So, and we haven't seen the inventory or the demand cut in half.
Yeah.
So that just shows it's still moving forward.
The lack of inventory, especially down over where I'm at, there's still a very few listings that are available.
Right.
And so there seems like there's a little bit more inventory down here, but I feel like there's probably always
more inventory down here. Yeah.
Yeah.
This land's always more transitional.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That I find that really interesting. And so with that being in mind, as someone that's listening to this right now and they've been saving up for the last 3 years and they're looking, do you have any advice for that person that's serious, looking, and just, I guess, advice to help navigate the market we're in right now?
Yeah, I'd say this isn't a time I would rush into anything. I think I would shop carefully. Your money, whatever money you've saved and stuff, that's starting to have power again. And I would make sure that, I would definitely go forward with your plans to purchase, but I would do so carefully. I think there are going to be a few good deals here and there. We're not going to see the market cut in half, anything like that. Just, a few things that may sell a little bit less than normal. So, than it normally was.
Yeah. It's been a heck of a ride, really, the last couple of years. I've just seen it, and I feel that this conversation could almost have been repeated multiple times, and then it still kept accelerating, and still kept going. But I think that's a fair assessment for sure. And you get a lot of phone calls, so I know you're deep in the trenches.
We're always we're always working on it. And that auction we were involved in last week in kind of up in in central Iowa, that was a good test of the market, and it actually, it went for about 20% less than it appraised at 3 to 4 months ago, but there was a bunch of people that called us after the auction that never even went because they thought it was going to go too high. And then they're kicking themselves. And that was a perfect, instance that had they said, just stayed the course, shopped carefully, they would have got a great deal that day on true high quality farmland, which doesn't come available very often.
Yeah.
So
I think that's an excellent point. I think it may be easy for people to get discouraged, but it's just the same thing. You just have to be looking. And every now and then you'll roll into something like that. And then let's say, for the example of someone that is looking for a recreational farm, they've saved up, and maybe it's a 40 or a 60 acre piece, and you would just still say, like, okay, if this hits enough marks on your checklist, it's within your budget, you would still say, hey,
go for it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and then that kind of segues into your new piece here. I want to talk about that. We went and hung cameras on it.
Yep. We got some stories to tell.
It's was that like the second or third time you've been on there?
I walked it. That's the first time I've been. No, that's only the second time I've been on it since we owned it. I walked it pretty good before we bought it, but that was probably the most time I've ever spent on it in one day by a long shot. And as you could tell, we had to bring a chainsaw with and cut trees to get through. So a lot of those places we'd never taken a side-by-side or a four-wheeler to. So it's pretty untouched.
Yeah,
so.
Which was it was fun going through and kind of breaking down that property with you, and we were hanging cameras. And we also, Richard has a black eye.
Yeah, because I've got a black eye.
You got a black eye rolling in.
Yep.
And so I'll let you tell the story of that in terms of uncharted territory.
Yeah. Well, part of what we're doing is getting to the back part of the farm where we, wanted to hang some cameras and keep that, be able to get to it. And I brought my small side-by-side that's really just a two-seater, but we crammed 3 people into the front, and we had all kinds of stuff loaded in the back. And going through the CRP, we were pretty careful at first, and if something looked questionable, we'd get out we're talking shoulder to head high grass. We would get out and walk it to make sure there wasn't a waterway that had washed out or something. And inevitably, I kind of stopped doing that or forgot to do it.
Out.
Yeah, we were headed back out, and we fell into a 3 or 4 foot deep ditch. And literally, the front of the buggy dropped in and stopped instantly, and my head hit the steering wheel. And
that goes flying.
Yeah. So, and it got us good. I mean, we all sat there kind of half stunned, and I felt my face and felt blood running down, and it was like, oh no.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we survived to tell the tale. Richard bonked his head. I bonked my head.
Yep.
We broke the reverse shifter.
Yeah,
with my
broke
knee.
the shifter off the 4-wheeler. So it's always something. So.
Yeah, but so what? That type of farm, I think, I like those farms. I like them for a variety of reasons. I think there's really good income on it, and there's arguably good hunting on it as well.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of people people, when they're thinking about their ideal farm, they think of pure timber.
Right.
I think a lot of times, like, oh, this farm doesn't have a lot of timber, for example. And what's your thought process on that? And I know they both have their places.
Yeah, comparing this farm to an all timber or primarily timber farm, the reason I like these is the deer activity is definitely condensed into smaller areas. We'll be able to learn and have that farm set up well to cover all of our rut funnel spots the first year. They're very easy spots to find, very textbook. They don't have much, they don't require a lot of like heavy equipment, moving trees, building funnels, stuff like that. It all is natural right there. And then the other thing, that I really like about a farm like that is because it has good CRP income. CRP is great habitat. It's something that you can improve and make better. And a lot of the improvement projects, you can get cost share to do them. So, that's kind of the balance to me, because on a 240 acre farm, whether it was all timber or this one, which is, basically 200 acres of CRP and 40 acres of draws and ditches, on a 240 acre farm, I'm only going to have 8 or 10 spots either way. And this way, they're that much easier and that much more predictable, for sure. So
yeah, the sign's going to be more condensed across the board. And yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see. We put out 6 rivals, I think, or 5 rivals.
Yeah.
And some lift twos.
And some lifts, yeah.
And so I'll be curious what's running around out there. And so yeah, that's really interesting. So what do you have a mental checklist when you're looking at a potential farm, whether you're helping a client buy it or if something that you might be buying? Do you have a mental checklist of what you look for in a farm?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one right off the bat is, what do we have for income? Try to decide if the price point on the farm is worth it relative to the income or the potential income, whether that's crops, CRP, or just strictly timber. Those are all different sources of income that we might utilize in different ways on buying a farm. And then the other thing is, like a farm like that where it's already in CRP, that's a huge leap ahead, because if it happened to have been cattle pasture, our normal strategy would be to start farming it and then the whole place, and then the areas that are critical for habitat, we would at some point re-enroll, but that could be a 5 to 7 year process. This way, you can always take CRP and farm it. You can't always take farmland and make CRP out of it easily. Yeah. So that in that case, this farm checked that box to me. And then, one of the things that's getting more rare to me, I like farms that are kind of unimproved when we get them, and clean slates that we can start with. This one definitely checked that box.
Yeah.
And driving around that perimeter, or the section roads there, I don't think internal of our section, other than one shooting house, that there was much sign of any serious hunting. And I kind of like that too.
Yeah. I think that's a huge benefit. And the other exciting thing with this farm too is there was no food previously. And
nothing.
You're able to put food on there. So, so any other checklist, like, how big of a deal is access for you, or how big is it? I mean, the neighborhood you mentioned on, but anything else that's on a mental checklist, or anything that's an absolute deal breaker of, no, this farm doesn't make sense for whatever reason.
Yeah, access is a big deal, and I think we've got 3 or 4 road type access points on this one, which will work. Ideally, we would like to acquire something from the east and something from the south, which we'll work on as we get more familiar with the neighbors and the people out there. That would be one box. I would say, like, if I was rating on a access, I was rating this farm on a 1 to 10 scale of access. I think this one's probably a 7. It's not ideal, but it's workable. And once we're there a little while, we're usually able to improve that. So I'm confident we can come up with something there to get a little bit better access. So,
what about? I'm trying to think here. I think you touched on a lot of. So when you're looking at something from an income perspective, we'll use this farm.
Yep.
We'll use like a CRP farm, for example. Is there like a % return that you're trying to hit, or a certain income per acre that you try to hit?
Yeah, I mean, like this one of the benefits is I don't have a set income. I usually try to think a couple years down the road. And like this one was bid in a time when the rates were lower. So we're going to ride out the rest of this contract. And I think it's in at $160 an acre or something, 161, which isn't great. And then, hopefully at that point, whether we're the owners or somebody else, you could re-enroll that at a much higher rate, and that would greatly change the return on the farm. And then we haven't talked about the walnuts yet, but this farm, which is very rare for a CRP farm, has some beautiful big walnuts. So we're going to manage for those going forward here. So
Yeah. What do you, if you were to re-enroll that, let's say it expired and you were going to re-enroll it now, do you think that'd get over 200?
Yeah. Using the county average rates on those soil types, that should go in the high 190 to 210 range, depending on how you re-enrolled it, and that would be about a 30% increase in income, which would be huge.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. And so I want to talk a little bit about taking. I think this is something that a lot of people would probably be curious. So you bought it. You're gonna be putting it in food plots here in August, or probably here pretty darn soon.
Yep.
You sprayed one of them when we were out there.
Yep.
So what is the strategy of taking CRP? You have this CRP program has an allotment for food plots.
Right.
What is that process, start to finish, of taking CRP into food plots for your recreational farm?
Like on this one, we've got. Because we have almost 200 acres of CRP, it's divided up into 5 or 6 fields. Each of those fields we can do up to 10% of.
So you can't. This is a misconception.
Yes.
You can't put 20
Yeah,
20 acre
you
field.
cannot have one 20-acre field. You can only have 10% of each field up to 5 acres.
Yep.
So that's a big difference, and that kind of strategy is important. In managing an existing CRP farm, but it's even more important when you're enrolling something in CRP, because if you divide it up too small and make all these weird little fields, you're going to have weird little food plots instead of connecting a couple fields together to get enough size to make something that you can manage.
So all right. So you plan on putting in 2 different food plots. You spray it with glyphosate.
Yep.
And then from there, what do you do?
Yeah, like the general, just so we truly start from scratch for people with the process. The first thing we're going to do is go in, talk to FSA, explain what we're doing. We can't do anything until August 1st. We can't do any mowing or anything like that. So August 1st is when we'll start on the actual mowing and prep work of the plots. But once we show FSA where we're going to do them, we'll mow it, give it a couple days to green up, and then spray it, and then once the spray is soaked in and killed everything, then we'll probably till those plots up, because they're going to be pretty rough. Like you saw, there's a lot of cedar trees, a lot of brush, stuff like that we're going hills, stuff like that we're going to have to remove. So the ground's going to need to be worked at least once to incorporate the fertilizer, level everything up, and then normally, if we were doing this project in April, this would be a standard, small green plot leading to a bigger grain plot. This year, we're going to do a small green plot leading to a bigger turnip plot. So it's sort of green to green, so to speak. But in this instance, it'll still serve that function, because the brassica or turnip plots, those will be our carbohydrates, like for our late season muzzleloader hunting or anytime later in the season. So,
And what are you planning in the green plot, and how much per acre are you putting out in terms of poundage?
I think on the way we're splitting those up, they're going to be about two food plots total of about 5 acres each, and then there'll be 4 acres of the brassicas, 1 acre of the green, and then on the green section, we're going to use, that's going to be done to oats, Austrian winter peas, probably a little bit of red clover, and that's a pretty high poundage mix, because I call it a chia plot. Like, you literally want it to just be lush green and something always lush and green and growing, and them focus on that. So on a deal like that, we'll probably have 60 pounds of oats, 70 pounds of oats, a full 50-pound bag of Austrian winter peas, probably 4 or 5 pounds of red clover. That's more just a soil building clover, and then so you're probably talking 110, 120 pounds per acre on the small green plot. And then on the brassica plot, it's the opposite. We plant a fairly low rate, trying to get the brassicas to grow quite a bit of size to them. So our brassica mix we plant is between 5 and 6 pounds per acre. So
What are some target dates to get that in?
well, your brassicas are the first ones that we have to do, and that's going to happen real soon here. Usually I try to get them in by the last week of July or the first week of August. And by doing that, you're going to give them plenty of time to get lots of growth and get up to softball sized turnips. That's the best way to get all the the tonnage we can out of it and still have a lot of lush tops as well. And then the second part of it will be done in late August. You don't want the oats and stuff to grow long enough to go back to seed. You want them to be able to be nipped down and managed by the deer. So.
Is there an ideal or is there a minimum acreage size in your mind for a brassica plot?
In this instance, I think we're making these too big, but it's going to prep the ground for years going forward.
Yep.
So we're going to go ahead and do it. But 2 acres of brassicas is a lot if they do well. I mean, that's a lot. It'd be rare that you would run out of that on a farm during hunting season. So
when do you see the brassicas be most productive? Is it late season, or do you still see them there or in October?
If we get a frost and then, that changes that plant starts growing and producing. I've heard sugars, I've heard it's something else, but when they start getting nipped by a frost, those brassicas will start sweetening up, and the deer really will start aggressively going after the tops. Usually in our area, that's around the 20th of October, 15th, 20th through Halloween till the rut gets going. They're ideal, and then they'll start hitting them again after November or after December 1st, kind of post rut through the feeding period of the late season.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good illustration. And with that mix there, it seems like you should have something for basically the majority of the season.
Yep. We doing these plots this big, we'll be able to shed hunt those plots. There'll be plenty left in the winter. They'll be digging them out in March still. So, which that's always nice too. So.
Yeah, I think that's I think most people, when they have CRP, that's one of the first things they want to do is figure out can they put food.
Yes.
And then I think it's really important that you mention, just because you have a field, even if it looks like it's one continuous field, depending on how it's drawn up.
Yes, it's all when it was enrolled and how it was drawn up. And then I don't know if you wanted to bring up the firebreaks part of this.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, so that's something else that I think is a potential improvement to allow you, A, to improve the CRP and B, have more food. So explain what that looks like.
Yeah, one of the challenges with this farm is it's been in CRP for quite a while. I'm assuming this is its second renewal. So, it's been in for 20 plus years, and there's a lot of cedar trees that are starting to take over the field. And over the years that you could see someone had gone in and maybe taken a skid loader and snipped off the big ones, but there's a lot of 2 and 3 foot tall cedar trees, lots of them, like we're talking thousands. And so the best way to manage that and also just for the health of the warm season grasses is through fire. So what we're going to do on the perimeter of that entire farm, we're going to, with FSA and NRCS's permission, we're going to install 30-foot strips of firebreaks. And the different NRCS seed plans call for different things, but they're primarily legumes, not grass species, because that clover, it doesn't really burn. It's not a real heavy fuel. It's low to the ground. So by putting the entire perimeters of that farm in clover firebreaks, it gives us a huge amount of food for the deer, and then it also makes burning the farm very easily because at that point, you don't need any heavy equipment or anything like that. You can just go in, if you happen to get a warm day, a couple warm days in February, you can go in and burn that, and and that'll help clean those cedars off and kind of. Well, if we would have done that, we would have known where that ditch was.
You're darn right.
So
Richard would have a black eye. Right
yeah, we both wouldn't have black eyes. But I think that's going to be like going forward with the farm. Once that's established and growing, that's the one that's going to be like, wow, this is a really nice farm. Like it's going to really, because it does kind of frame the field as far as you got woods, clover, native warm season grass. It kind of puts it all in one spot.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what this place looks like in 2 years from
now.
I think it's going to look completely different.
It will for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's really cool. And as far as, is there any other notes you have on that farm? Because my mind is, I'm just thinking of some of the different camera locations that we put out. Because what's cool about this is how, I don't think it's necessarily actual creeks, but there's a lot of places you can manipulate your wind.
Yeah.
And a lot of cool places that feel that you should be able to kill a big deer.
Yes, yeah.
There's a couple of spots that we walked is like, this is a no-brainer because of ABC.
Right, yeah. Very, very natural funnels that are strong. The other thing we're going to consider doing on that farm, I think we found 3 ponds on the farm, 1, 2, 3, and there's really no other water, and there didn't seem to be much water close by. So we've got cameras on 2 of those setups, so it'll be interesting to see their use of the water, and then that would be the only other project that I would do on this would be maybe install some small water holes in or close to one of those rut funnel areas just to really put it over the top. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That would be one other project that I don't know that that'll get done this year, but that's definitely on the list for the future of really making that an excellent farm.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent, and that's so you have a farm cranking out a bunch of income, and you have, a good whitetail farm too.
Yeah.
I think people think that those 2 things can't exist.
No, that's a good example of, both those things being in one package for sure. So.
Yeah. Let's see here. So I have a bunch of different notes, and I'm just thinking of what we should cover here. So I think this is kind of a hard pivot here, but in the world of there's so many different investments. If you open up anything, there's invest in this, invest in gold, invest in all these different things. In your hearts of heart, do you feel that land is a very sound, good investment? Obviously, I know the answer to this. But.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's a no-brainer, and we've talked about all that, some of that stuff before about the fact that that's my primary vehicle of investing, and it's never let me down in all the times that I've done it. It's like anything, you do have to be careful doing it, but. By far, it's highly tangible. It can't disappear. So even in the worst of the worst during COVID, when the stock market was dropping like a rock, I have one good friend who I manage land for here, and he works in the stock market, and he asked, "What do you think my farm would sell for today?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, that's crazy because our stock portfolio dropped 50% and land might have been off by 10%.
Yeah.
So, that was a good test for me. Stable, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's, and I've talked about this on this podcast too, but just the inefficiencies in real estate.
Yes.
That's something that has always been there. I think that's something that will become less.
Yes.
As more tools and information becomes available. But it just, I've talked to so many different people, and I still want to talk to someone that it didn't work out for long term, but I just haven't found that person
that's kind of strange that you can't find that person, but
I know.
It's kind of cool in a way too.
Yeah, because I get comments or emails like, you just have people that have been successful in this. And maybe someone that wasn't, maybe they don't want to share their story, but I would invite them.
Yeah, that would make a good podcast for sure.
Yeah. So Richard had this is live Q&A right now.
Yeah, which is good.
What is your actual approach for hunting CRP land? And I know there's different types of CRP, and so let's just kind of look at this from a perspective of some warm season grasses or pollinators, because I think that's what, or even cool season grasses too, because I think there's a lot of that. Well, there's at least a lot of cool season grass CRP where I'm at, not as much out here. But what's your approach? What excites you, and what makes you kind of think?
We spent all the time this week or weekend at my new farm, but the best answer of that question, like what's the best way to incorporate CRP and a hunting strategy? The best example of that is going to be on my farm right around here by the lake. And what we've done there, using tall prairie grass, which is primarily cover, and then using the shorter one, which is much higher in forbs and wildflowers, and we're actually treating that as food sources. We're not treating them
general browse.
Yeah, general browse. We don't want it as we're not using them as destination food plots, but just general feeding areas for the deer. And with it's actually because FSA now requires 2 cover types in a CRP contract. I'm trying to think of tall grass and a short grass. You can't do just all of one. At least all the ones I enrolled this year were that way. We were required to pick 2 cover types or 2 seeding types, which from a hunter standpoint works out absolutely perfect because anywhere that you want cover, screening, bedding, that type of cover, that's your tall prairie grass. Anywhere we'd rather want more food, that's your, you like your 30-10 mix or something like that with more forbs and less grasses. So I'm pretty excited about that because we're literally, and the greatest thing, it's CRP, so you're getting paid on all of it.
Yeah.
But like on that farm, I've got 7 miles of clover fire breaks. I've got 100 and something acres of tall bedding cover. I've got 60 acres of forbs for food. So I'm building in year-round food sources, access, everything into that CRP. It's really excellent. And this farm that we're on yesterday, I've sort of am bound to some degree by what was enrolled in the past and what rules are in place. I'm not starting from scratch, but I'll amend what I can. But my farm over here, my Appanoose County farm, that's the one that's really going to be a showcase of what you can do with CRP from a hunting standpoint. So
yeah, that makes sense. And I think, what about let's say someone was able to get permission on a mainly CRP farm. How do you go about breaking that down? Is it literally kind of finding the trees and potential pinch points? And
depending on how much control you're given by the landowner, if it was a permission farm, if you were allowed to do something as simple as mowing, even CRP that they can walk through, if you're allowed to mow trails where you want them to walk, that's a huge plus. You can take 2 or 3 trails, like a wagon wheel, bring them into one, and then bring that one past your stand, because they will generally, when they travel to bed, they don't take the same trail every day. But if you give them 3 options that all lead to one option, you can really use that CRP as a funnel. And that helps take away sort of when you stand there staring at an ocean of native grass, you can start to break it down, and that's a way to make something like that bow huntable.
Yeah.
So
that's a very simple, useful tool.
Yeah, another little thing like that, and again, this one you'd probably have to ask FSA and NRCS. I don't know if they're going to be down with it, but if you have an area along the road and you have good native grass, this could even be on a permission place. If you get urea fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer, and just walk through it with a broadcast spreader, if you do that as soon as you start to get hot weather in June, hopefully ahead of a rain, you can almost double the size of that grass. So you can create thicker, taller, screen, or if you just want to make one area of the field act as more of a bedding cover than the rest, you can do that. And you're talking, a bag of urea is $20. So, 3 or 4 bags in a couple hours of time with a broadcast spreader, you can really change the dynamics of a CRP field from a hunting standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I never even want to consider.
Yeah.
That.
Yep. So
tricks of the trade.
Tricks of the trade. Exactly. Yeah. All the things we learn as we go.
Yeah. Has there been any mistakes from the farms that you've owned in the past, that whether it was on the buy, whether it was on the sell, or when you owned it, that you simply won't make that mistake again?
Well, in my younger days, I sold a lot of farms too soon and too cheap.
Meaning it wasn't a finished product enough? Or?
No, I just should have realized what I had. I had a farm at one point that was 240 acres in Iowa and 80 acres in Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
On one farm. And I should have kept that one, or if I did sell it, it should have been at an absolute premium, because that was the type of situation that you can't replicate.
No.
You know what I mean? Or not very easily.
What was the mechanics of that? Because you could hunt you're hunting the same deer basically, but you have your Missouri tag every year.
Yep, you had a Missouri tag every year, and you also had sort of alternating turkey seasons.
Yeah.
So like the guy I sold it to is from Pennsylvania, so they would, draw like a season 1 Iowa tag, then go right into Missouri 1-bird season, then Missouri 2-bird season. So you literally, had triple the opportunities to turkey hunt that a guy that just owns an Iowa farm. And when we had that farm, we literally had a food plot that ran into both states, and we drove a stake in the ground like, okay, if you're hunting Missouri, you can't shoot past here. But that's the kind of farm that, I regret it. I didn't know, no one knew what the future was going to bring, and we made great money on it, and it was a really neat project. And those guys still own it to this day. They know what they have. So
that's such an ultra rare farm.
Yes.
How often does that happen?
It's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. It would be a kind of a neat project to try to build one, but it would be like a life-size jigsaw puzzle. Trying to put that together.
Yeah, you'd have to go just look on
Yeah, you'd have to
On
find
X
one and then
yeah,
work on the other, and
see how to connect them.
yes, yep. And then you'd have to work with agents or somehow that were licensed in both states,
Yeah.
and that would be another complexity to it. But yeah, that would be
Was that the second farm you bought? After you
no,
sold
that was probably it was close. It was that same year, so it would have been the second or third. It was right after that. Yeah, I forgot about that. It would have been that long ago, but yeah, that
So the lesson there is knowing what you have, and I think that's probably easier now with
yeah.
all the information. But that is such cool.
Yeah, that was such, and what even makes it even crazier is it was high income. It had everything. It literally had everything, and yeah, so that would that was one regret on that side of things. But and like I said, we did very well on it. I'm not kicking myself. It's just
It's a once in a
yeah.
super rare
I
farm.
just didn't realize how rare it was
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and you found it's one of those deals you're so green to it still, and you
right,
just don't know.
exactly. So.
Okay, so understand what you have. What else? Anything else?
On regret side, I mean, obviously we could all say we should have bought more, but you
Sure.
can't count that because
Yep.
without a crystal ball, you wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's easy to look back and say everything worked out, but
Right.
yeah.
Right, and I'm trying to make up for this now. But the other thing is, I didn't hunt enough back then. Yeah, I went through a long stretch without hunting much for myself, or very minimally.
Yep.
And it was kind of funny. I ended up taking a good friend of mine that him and I would go up and hunt Alberta with him. He would come down here and hunt with me. He was an outfitter also, and we would kind of trade. And he's the one that finally told me, he's like, hey, you got to start hunting more. He's like, you're getting sloppy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like on your setups
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, and I was kind of like, shoot. And now
He's
again,
one of those friends that could just tell you how it
oh,
was.
he is. I'll say his name,
the French
and if
Canadian.
anybody knows him, they would know how he is. His name's Jim Hole.
Okay.
And he was famous for the Alberta Bow Zone.
Oh, him. Okay.
Yeah, the one that he designed a lot of
yeah.
the Sitka gear.
Yeah,
That's who he was. That's
Oh, really?
Yep. Him and I used to hunt together all the time. So.
So yeah, he's definitely the guy to tell you that.
Yes, he's going to
Watching
critique
that
you every
video.
day. Like you cook dinner, he's going to have a list of things and he's being constructive. He's
Sure,
not
yeah.
doing it in a bad way, but
Yeah.
he's an engineer mindset kind of guy.
Yeah.
So he's just going to, try to make everything better. But yeah, and I, there were years that I didn't invest a lot of my own time into hunting, and it was like now thinking back, it was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, you wish you'd go back and relive some of those seasons.
Yes,
I'm sure.
yep.
So what's your strategy now then? Is it just to set more time for yourself during the season?
Right now it is, but after Jim's criticism, I kind of took it to heart and I started hunting hard, and I had a couple amazingly good years, almost to where people started saying, okay, you can stop now. And then I'm just kind of normal with it now, but now I am trying to make more time to hunt for myself and really block it out and make sure. Really, what's always been a challenge if you're involved in the guiding is you never get to hunt the rut.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that is such a cool time to be in the woods. So now it's like, nope, the other guys that my partners can run the business and they can take care of everything, and I'm going to hunt,
Enjoy it,
Yeah. We've got all these farms and you make all these setups. It's fun to sit in the tree and actually see it all work,
Yeah, for sure. Well, anything else here on the land side of things? Because I do want to, here's a teaser for everyone. We're going to record one about November.
Yep.
And that'll go live on the Exodus podcast closer to November. So set a reminder in your calendar.
Yep.
We're going to be talking about
It'll
that.
be here before you know it.
It will be, absolutely. And I'll just maybe just briefly touch on what you're doing right now until October 1 for whitetails. I know you got a coveted elk tag.
Yeah, we've got a lot of elk hunting to do, but that's September. But right now the things that are on our forefront is just any new blinds that have to go in, new stand locations. Start working on those. Obviously cameras. That's a big part of what's happening right now. And then we'll start this week on planning the brassica plots. We'll start on that and hit it pretty hard the next 2 weeks. Hopefully get all that done. We had kind of a challenging late spring, early summer, had an unprecedented dry spell. So we've got to evaluate all our plots like soybeans and see if they're going to make it and be a viable plot, or if we just have to go ahead and plan on tearing them up and redoing them.
Yeah. We got those good rains. It rained last night here.
Yeah, we did get and that wasn't called for. We've really lucked out on little rains like that. And we do an unbelievable amount of electric fencing.
Yeah.
That's all up right now, so it's just kind of simple maintenance. But it has to be done because deer knock it down and trees fall on it and whatnot. But Yeah, the electric fence is a big part of what we're always working on as well.
Is there a mental deadline for you to have a blind set up for season?
I should say yes, but I don't, and it's counterintuitive, but I've seen them put up fairly late. What I do try to do, if we don't have a crew together to help put one up, I try to get it to the plot. Even if it's sitting on the ground, and all the stuff is sitting there, whatever the stand's going to be and stuff. Seems like once it's there, they get used to it. And then you can put it up, you can move it, and they've kind of accepted it. You put them up too late in the year and you can have problems with that. It seems like, the other time that I really like to do that is going to be when the corn is cut. It seems like when
all the trains.
Yeah, there's all the commotion, and it seems like the corn's standing, they're used to that, the corn's gone, and whatever they take in that day, that's the new landscape. So
that's good advice. Well, definitely appreciate your time as always. We're going to talk about the rut, and I'm going to be ready to come back to Iowa by the time we get done.
Now, hopefully we got some more pictures to look at.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. But go ahead and share where people can find you. I know you're always posting what the shenanigans you get into.
Yep, yeah. Instagram's the best place to keep track of me, and that's also on Facebook. And the Instagram is just my name, Steve Hansen III. And then you can always find us at Hawkeye United Country in Albia, Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much once again. I had a really fun weekend, and I'm already counting down the days till next time I come out here. Might be August, might be
whenever. You're welcome anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.